Due to the Messerschmitt Bf 109's versatility and time in service with both the Luftwaffe and other foreign air forces, numerous variants were produced over the 8 years of service with the Luftwaffe, and even more were produced by its foreign users. Bf 109 at B, C, D. The 109 was a dream, the non-plus-ultra. Of course, everyone wanted to fly it as soon as possible. The Bf 109A was the first version of the Bf 109. Armament was initially planned to be just 2 cal-mounted 7.92mm MG-17 machine guns. However, possibly due to the introduction of the Hurricane and Spitfire, each with 8 7.7mm machine guns, experiments were carried out with a third machine gun firing through the propeller shaft. V4 and some A0 were powered by a 640 PS Junkers Jumo 210B engine driving a 2-blade fixed-pitch propeller, but production was changed to the 670 PS Jumo 210D as soon as it became available. The A0 was not of a uniform type. There were several changes in their appearance. Visible changes included engine, cockpit and machine gun ventilation holes, slats, and the location of the oil cooler was changed several times to prevent overheating. Many of these Bf 109A0s served with the Legion Condor and were often misidentified as B-series aircraft, and probably served in Spain with the tactical markings 6-1 to 6-16. 1A0, marked as 6-15, ran out of fuel and was forced to land behind enemy lines. It was captured by Republican troops on the 11th of November 1937 and later transferred to the Soviet Union for a closer inspection. 6-15 incorporated several improvements from the Bf 109B production program and had been prepared to use a variable pitch propeller, although it had not been installed. According to RLM documentation, 22 aircraft were ordered and delivered with V4 as the A-series prototype. The first Bf 109 in serial production, the Bf 109B1, was fitted with the 670 PS Jumo 210D engine driving a 2-bladed fixed-pitch propeller. During the production run, a variable pitch propeller was introduced and often retrofitted to older aircraft. These were then unofficially known as B2S. The Bf 109B saw combat with the Legion Condor during the Spanish Civil War. Although it was apparent that the armament was still inadequate, several aircraft were produced with an engine-mounted machine gun, but it was very unreliable, most likely because of engine vibrations and overheating. Thus, the Bf 109VH was constructed to test the fitting of 2 more machine guns in the wings. However, results showed that the wing needed strengthening. In the following V9 prototype, both wing guns were replaced by 20mm MGFF cannons. A total of 341 Bf 109B1 were built by Messerschmitt, Fiesler, and the Erler Maschinenwerke. Production of the short-lived Bf 109C began in the spring of 1938. The 109C was powered by a 700 PS Jumo 210G engine with direct fuel injection. Another important change was a strengthened wing, now carrying 2 more machine guns, giving 4 7.92mm MG-17s in total. The C0 were pre-production aircraft. The C1 was the production version, and the C2 was an experimental version with an engine-mounted machine gun. The C-3 was planned with 20mm MGFF cannons replacing the two MG-17s in the wings, but it is not known how many C-3 were built or converted. The C-4 was planned to have an engine-mounted motor cannon MGFF, but the variant was not produced. A total of 58 Bf-109C of all versions were built by Messerschmitt. The next model, the V10 Prototype, was identical to the V8, except for its Jumo 210G engine. The V10, V11, V12 and V13 prototypes were built using Bf-109B airframes, and tested the DB600A engine with the hope of increasing the performance of the aircraft. The DB600A was dropped as the improved DB601A with direct fuel injection was soon to become available. Developed from the V10 and V13 prototypes, the Bf-109D was the standard version of the Bf-109 in service with the Luftwaffe just before the start of World War II. Despite this, the type saw only limited service during the war, as all of the 235 Bf-109D still in Luftwaffe service at the beginning of the Poland campaign were rapidly taken out of service and replaced by the Bf-109E, except in some night fighter units where some examples were used into early 1940. Variants included D0 and D1 models, both having a Junkers Jumo 210D engine and armed with two wing-mounted and two nose-mounted 7.92mm MG-17s. And GT. The D2 was an experimental version with an engine-mounted machine gun, but as previously tried, this installation failed. The D3 was similar to the C3 but with two 20mm MGFFs in the wings. A total of 647 Bf-109D of all versions were built by Focke-Wulf, Erler, Fieseler, Arado and Igo. Messerschmitt is listed as having produced only 4 Bf-109D, probably the D0 pre-production series, with the serial production transferred to licensed manufacturers. Several Bf-109D were sold to Hungary. Switzerland bought an 109D1S, which had been built by the Arado Flugzeugwerke GmbH factory located in Warnemünde. Bf-109E. In late 1938, the Bf-109E entered production. To improve on the performance afforded by the 441 to 515 kW Jumo 210, the larger, longer Daimler-Benz DB601A engine was used, yielding an extra 223 kW at the cost of an additional 181 kilograms. A much bigger cooling area was needed to disperse the extra heat generated by the DB601, and this led to the first major redesign of the basic airframe, enlarging the existing nose-mounted radiator sufficiently to cool the engine would have created extra weight and drag, negating some of the performance gains afforded by the increased power. So it was decided to move the main radiators to beneath the wings under surfaces immediately outboard of the juncture between the wing root and wing panel, just forward of the trailing edge's inner ends, leaving the oil cooler under the nose in a small, streamlined duct. The new radiator position also had the effect of counterbalancing the extra weight and length of the DB601, which drove a heavier three-bladed Vereinigte Deutsche Metallwerke-made propeller. To incorporate the new radiators, the wings were almost completely redesigned and reinforced, with several inboard ribs behind the spar being cut down to make room for the radiator ducting. because the radiators were now mounted near the trailing edge of the wing, coinciding with the increased speed of the airflow accelerating around the wing's camber. The overall cooling installation was more efficient than that of the Jumo-engined 109s, albeit at the cost of extra ducting and piping, which could be vulnerable to battle damage. In addition, the lowered undercarriage could throw up mud and debris on wet airfields, potentially clogging the radiators. To test the new 1100 PS B601A engine, two more prototypes were built, each differing in their armament. While the V14 was armed with two 7.92mm MG17s above the engine and one 20mm MG-FF in each wing, the V15 was just fitted with the two MG17s mounted above the engine. After test flights, the V14 was considered more promising and a pre-production batch of 10 E0 was ordered. Batches of both E1 and E3 variants were shipped to Spain for evaluation, and first saw combat during the final phases of the Spanish Civil War. The E1 production version kept two 7.92mm MG17s above the engine and two more in the wings. Later, many were modified to the E3 armament standard. The E1B was a small batch of E1s that became the first operational Bf 109 fighter bomber, or jagged bomber. These were fitted with either an etc. 500 bomb rack, carrying one 250 kg bomb, or 450 kg bombs. The E1 was also fitted with the reflex visor Revi gun sight. Communications equipment was the FUG-7 Funkgerät 7 short-range radio apparatus, effective to ranges of 48 to 56 kilometers. A total of 1,183 E1 were built, 110 of them were E1B. Only very limited numbers of the E2 variant were built, for which the V10 prototype served as basis. It was armed with two wing-mounted and one engine-mounted motor cannon MG-FF cannon, which gave considerable trouble in service, as well as two synchronized MG-17's Cal machine guns. In August 1942, JG-27 was operating this type. To improve the performance of the Bf 109E, the last two real prototypes were constructed. These received some structural improvements and more powerful armament. Both were the basis of the Bf 109 E3 version. The E3 was armed with the two MG-17s above the engine and one MG-FF cannon in each wing. A total of 1,276 E3 were built, including 83 E3A export versions. The E3 was replaced by the E4, which was different in some small details, most notably by using the modified 20mm MG-FF-M wing cannon and having improved head armor for the pilot. With the MG-FF-M, it was possible to fire a new and improved type of explosive shell, called Menengaschos, which was made using drawn steel instead of being cast as was the usual practice. This resulted in a shell with a thin but strong wall, which had a larger cavity in which to pack a much larger explosive charge than was otherwise possible. The new shell required modifications to the MG-FF's mechanism due to the different recoil characteristics, hence the MG-FF-M designation. The cockpit canopy was also revised to an easier-to-produce, squared-off design, which also helped improve the pilot's field of view. This canopy, which was also retrofitted to many E1s and E3s, was largely unchanged until the introduction of a welded, heavy-framed canopy on the G series in the autumn of 1942. The E4 would be the basis for all further Bf-109E developments. Some E4 and later models received a further improved 1175 PSD B601N high-altitude engine, known as the E4N, owing to priority being given to equipping Bf-110s with this engine. One fighter Gruppy was converted to this version, starting in July 1940. The E4 was also available as a fighter bomber with equipment very similar to the previous E1B. It was known as E4B and E4BN. A total of 561 of all E4 versions were built, including 496 E4s built as such, 250 E4, 211 E4B, 15 E4N and 20 E4BN. The E5 and E6 were both reconnaissance variants with a camera installation behind the cockpit. The E5 was a reconnaissance variant of the E3, the E6 was a reconnaissance variant of the E4N. 29 E5s were built and 9 E6 were ordered. E7 The E7 was the next major production variant, entering service and seeing combat at the end of August 1940. One of the limitations of the earlier Bf-109s was the short range of 660 km and limited endurance. As the design was originally conceived as a short-range interceptor, the E7 rectified this problem as it was the first Bf-109 subtype to be able to carry a drop tank. Usually the standardized Luftwaffe 300L capacity unit mounted on a center-line rack under the fuselage, which increased its range to 1,325 km. Alternatively, a bomb could be fitted and the E7 could be used as a Jabot fighter bomber. Previous Emil subtypes were progressively retrofitted with the necessary fittings for carrying a drop tank from October 1940. Early E7s were fitted with the 1100 PSD B601A, a 1175 PSD B601AA engine, while late production ones received 1175 PSD B601N engines with improved altitude performance. The latter was designated as E7N. A total of 438 E7s of all variants were built. Bf-109E variants and sub-variants E0, E1, E1B, E2, E3, E4, E4B, E4 Trop, E4N, E4BN, E5, E6, E7, E7N, E7NZ, E7, U2, E8, E9, Bf-190. Prior to the war, the Kriegsmarine had become fascinated with the idea of the aircraft carrier. Borrowing ideas from the British and Japanese, they started the construction of Graf Zeppelin as part of the rebuilding of the Navy. The air group for the carrier was settled on Messerschmitt Bf 190 fighters and Ju-87C dive bombers. The suffix T denotes Träger in German use, despite references to a Bf 190 version. This version never existed. 7 earlier versions were converted to test carrier equipment. This included adding a tailhook catapult fittings and increasing the wingspan to 11.08 meters. The ailerons were increased in span, as were the slats, and flap travel was increased. The wings were not modified to be folding since the ship Graf Zeppelin was designed around the intended aircraft, so the lifts could accommodate the Bf 190 with its 11 meters wingspan. The wings could, however, be detached from the fuselage for transport purposes, as in every version of the Bf 109. Following flight tests, especially the catapult tests, 70 T1 with DB601Ns were to be produced at Feistler in Kassel. But after 7 T1s were built, the carrier project was cancelled. The remaining 63 of 70 T1s were built as T2s without carrier equipment, and some of the T1s may have been upgraded to T2 standard. It was found that the performance of the T2 was closely comparable to the E4N, and, because of its ability to take off and land in shorter distances, these fighters were assigned to IJG-77, deployed in Norway on landing strips which were both short and subject to frequent powerful crosswinds. At the end of 1941, the unit was ordered to return their aircraft to Germany and received E3s as replacements. The armament of the Bf 190 consisted of two 7.92mm MG17s above the engine and one 20mm MG FFM cannon in each wing. Interest in Graf Zeppelin revived when the value of aircraft carriers became obvious, and in 1942 the ship was back in the yards for completion. By this time, the Bf 190 was hopelessly outdated and a new fighter would be needed. Messerschmitt responded with the updated Me 155A series, but work on the ship was again cancelled and the Me 155 was later repurposed as a high-altitude interceptor. Design work was transferred to Bloemen Amp Vos and the aircraft was then known as the BV 155. The Bf 109 Terra seconds were issued to several training units in 1943. Then, in April 1943, the Jagdstaffel Helgoland was formed and operated from June until late 1943, when the unit transferred to Lister in South Norway. The unit was renamed as 11 JG11 as of 30 November 1943, and the Bf 109 Terra seconds remained in operation until the summer of 1944, after which some were used in training units in Germany.